For more than 4 decades, America believed it knew Tom Silva. The humble carpenter from Massachusetts. The soft-spoken craftsman with gentle hands, steady eyes, and a voice that felt like home. He walked through half-collapsed attics, aging walls, and crooked staircases as if he were born inside the bones of old houses. To millions, Tom was the definition of honesty. A man who built things the right way, the slow way, the honest way. But behind the camera lights, behind the sawdust, the workshops, the famous episodes of This Old House, Tom Silva was living a life no viewer ever saw. A life he hid, not out of pride, but out of principle. Since 1999, he had been quietly moving money, materials, and manpower into something that had nothing to do with TV. Something only 3 families truly knew about. Something he made them promise never to speak of. Not on camera. Not in interviews. Not even in gratitude. And for 25 years, they kept silent. What Tom was funding, what he was building in the shadows, would shock even the people who watched him grow up. California wildfires. Massachusetts storms. Entire neighborhoods erased by disaster. Where government aid failed, where insurance companies disappeared, and where families were left staring at ashes in empty lots. Tom stepped in. But he never told the world why. Not until 2025, when a leaked report pulled the curtain back on the man millions thought they knew. It revealed the one part of Tom's life he never filmed. A foundation nobody knew existed. A mission he started the same year his career exploded. A promise he made to himself long before he ever held a microphone or appeared under studio lights. And it all began on a cold January morning in 1947. In a small colonial home in Lexington, Massachusetts, a place where the walls shook in the winter wind and where work was not just expected, it was required. Tom entered the world quietly. No celebration. No comfort. Just the sound of his father shaping stone in the back shed and his older brother Dick hammering nails into leftover planks. Tom's earliest memories were not of toys or games, but of tools. Handsaws with worn handles. Stone dust floating in the air. Wood shavings curling off the bench like thin ribbons. His father repaired stone walls on old New England properties, and little Tom watched, memorizing the rhythm long before he understood the meaning. By age 8, he was mixing mortar, his small hands working a task meant for grown men. By age 10, he held a hammer the way most kids held baseball bats. And by age 12, he carried a scar on his left hand, a permanent mark from a chisel that slipped during one of his earliest lessons. He grew up in a home partly built by family hands, where the living room was a workshop, and the kitchen table came second to whatever project needed fixing. He stained furniture with his father. He sanded old beams with his uncles. He learned, not through school books, but through mistakes, cuts, splinters, and repetition. And when he turned 16, his life changed again. His family built a fallout shelter beneath their 1787 colonial home. A massive 20 by 40 by 12-foot pit carved out with nothing but shovels and stubborn New England grit. 2 years of digging, framing, bracing, and sweating through cold earth. Those 2 years carved something into Tom, something deeper than any scar. A belief that real work isn't just construction. Real work is survival. Real work is honor. Real work is responsibility. The same responsibility that would one day drive him to rebuild homes he didn't own, for families he didn't know, in states he didn't live in. Because long before Tom Silva rebuilt houses on TV, he rebuilt something else. People. And no one knew. Not yet. Tom Silva wasn't born into fame, and he definitely didn't chase it. For years, he lived quietly inside the rhythm of construction, measure twice, cut once, and repeat until perfection. But destiny has a way of finding the people who never seek the spotlight, and that's exactly what happened to him. In the late 1970s, the Silva family earned a reputation for one thing: doing the job better than anyone else. Tom, along with his father and brothers, ran a small family contracting company with old-school values, honesty, precision, and craftsmanship you could trust blindfolded. Every nail, every joint, every beam had to be flawless. Not for praise, but because that's just who they were. Then came the turning point. A PBS production team began looking for real contractors, people who didn't just talk about renovating homes but lived it every single day. A friend connected them to the Silvas, and before Tom knew it, he was working behind the scenes on a little home improvement show nobody thought would go anywhere, This Old House. At first, Tom wasn't supposed to be on camera. He was just there to make sure the projects were done right. He was a consultant, a builder, a quiet presence who blended into the woodwork. But something about him stood out, something producers noticed immediately. Here was a man who didn't rehearse lines or try to look good on screen. He didn't need to. Tom Silva's confidence came from mastery, not ego. Viewers could instantly sense his authenticity, his warmth, his kindness, and his almost supernatural attention to detail. He was the kind of person who made you feel like you were learning from a trusted neighbor, not a TV star. It wasn't long before the cameras started following him. Week after week, audiences grew attached to Tom's explanations, his patient instructions, and even his gentle corrections when something wasn't up to standard. Watching Tom work wasn't just educational, it was strangely comforting. He made the impossible seem doable, and the confusing seem simple. His presence became the backbone of the show. As This Old House skyrocketed into national fame during the 1980s and 90s, Tom became more than a contractor, he became a symbol of craftsmanship. Fans wrote letters praising him. People traveled across states just to meet him at home expos. Families sat together on weekends, not for entertainment, but to learn from Tom Silva. And with fame came new opportunities, guest appearances, magazine features, interviews, partnerships, cross-country tours. Tom went from building homes to building a brand, one rooted in trust and excellence. But what made his rise even more extraordinary was that none of it changed him. He didn't start wearing fancy clothes, didn't move to Hollywood, didn't surround himself with managers or PR teams. Tom remained a humble New England builder at heart. He woke up early, put on his work boots, and got things done. Even at the height of his popularity, Tom continued showing up to job sites, mentoring young carpenters, and refining techniques most people would never even notice. To him, success wasn't measured in views or ratings, it was measured in the integrity of the work. But fame, fortune, and influence always come with a price. And soon, the very success that put Tom on a pedestal would begin pulling him into conflicts, controversies, and personal challenges that threatened everything he had worked for. With rising fame came a world Tom Silva never asked for, a world filled with expectations, deadlines, pressure, and a spotlight that never stopped burning. The man who once worked quietly on job sites was suddenly carrying a national television show on his shoulders, and the weight was heavier than anyone realized. On screen, Tom was calm, steady, and unshakable. Off-screen, things weren't always so simple. As This Old House grew into a massive franchise, the pressure for bigger episodes, tighter production windows, and more ambitious renovations skyrocketed. The days of small-town repairs were gone. Now, there were multi-million-dollar rebuilds, strict shooting schedules, and crews depending on Tom's expertise to keep everything moving. People saw polished final cuts on TV, but not the 16-hour days, the constant retakes, the stress of balancing real construction with television storytelling. Tom wasn't just building houses anymore, he was building episodes. And with every passing season, the expectations only got higher. Tom appreciated the fans, he truly did. But fame added responsibilities he never prepared for. Everywhere he went, people recognized him, asked for advice, or wanted to share their home renovation problems. Tom always tried to help, but it wasn't easy being America's favorite contractor 24/7. Then came corporate deals, brand partnerships, and the business side of being a TV personality. Contracts, negotiations, legal teams, the world became far more complicated than lumber, tape measures, and blueprints. Behind that warm smile was a man trying desperately to keep things in balance. Tom's dedication to his craft was one of his greatest strengths, and also one of his biggest challenges. Long hours away from home, seasons filmed back-to-back, travel commitments, and endless work schedules began affecting his personal life. Weekends disappeared. Holidays were interrupted. Moments with family slipped away, one deadline at a time. People close to him noticed the change. He was tired, mentally, physically, emotionally. Yet he pushed forward because he felt responsible for everyone depending on him, the crew, the fans, the producers, the network, the Silva family business. Tom Silva became a symbol of reliability, even when his own life felt anything but stable. As the show expanded, so did tensions behind the scenes. New producers brought new ideas, not all of them aligned with Tom's old-school vision. Tom believed in authenticity and real craftsmanship, not stage drama or shortcuts for the camera. But television is a business. At times, Tom found himself arguing with higher-ups about episode pacing, project decisions, and what should or shouldn't make it into the show. He never raised his voice, that wasn't his style, but he stood his ground. Craftsmanship came first. Always. Some colleagues admired him for it. Others felt frustrated. Slowly, silent disagreements began forming cracks inside the production team. Tom wanted the show to remain educational, real, and respectful to the craft. Producers wanted speed, excitement, and storylines that attracted bigger audiences. This tension grew season after season. Tom's perfectionism was legendary, but it came at a cost. He held himself to impossible standards. If a line wasn't straight, he fixed it. If a measurement was off by a fraction of an inch, he redid it. If something could be improved, Tom improved it, even if cameras weren't rolling. But perfection isn't sustainable forever. The stress wore him down, little by little. Sleepless nights. Exhaustion. Pressure that never eased. Tom kept smiling for the audience, but behind the scenes, he was reaching a breaking point. By the time the show entered its later seasons, Tom faced a crossroads that would change not only his career, but his identity. Every legend has a moment where the weight becomes too heavy, and for Tom Silva, that moment didn't arrive suddenly. It built up slowly, quietly, silently, like a crack in a foundation no one notices until it's almost too late. For years, Tom had pushed through exhaustion, conflicts, and the growing demands of fame. He never complained, never took sick days, never let anyone see how drained he truly was. But behind that familiar smile viewers loved, Tom was fighting a battle few people knew about. Tom's work wasn't like other TV jobs. It wasn't acting, it was physical labor. Decades of lifting heavy beams, kneeling on cold concrete, climbing ladders, bending, carrying, sawing, it all added up. His back began giving him problems. His knees hurt every morning. His hands were constantly swollen from years of gripping tools. Doctors warned him that his body needed rest, real rest, not the short breaks between filming seasons. But Tom didn't know how to slow down. He had spent his entire life moving, building, creating. Slowing down felt like quitting. And Tom Silva didn't quit. Physically exhausted, mentally overwhelmed, and emotionally drained, Tom reached a point where even simple tasks felt heavier than they used to. He still worked with precision, still taught with patience, but the spark, the energy, the joy he once felt wasn't the same. At home, he was quieter. More distant. More reflective. His family worried, but Tom brushed it off. He wasn't the type to burden others with his problems. He believed he could handle anything, until suddenly, he couldn't. Just as Tom was dealing with personal challenges, this old house was evolving. The industry was changing. Audiences wanted flashier episodes, faster results, and more dramatic moments. New producers pushed for modernization. They wanted quicker builds, heavily scripted scenes, and a polished look that didn't always align with real construction. Tom hated it. He didn't mind adapting, but he refused to compromise his standards. He didn't want staged arguments, unrealistic timelines, or anything that misrepresented the craft he dedicated his life to. He stood firm, but the pushback grew stronger. Meetings became more tense. Creative disagreements turned into heated discussions. Tom felt like he was fighting to protect the soul of the show, alone. People around him noticed he wasn't as enthusiastic as he used to be. He still delivered excellence, but the pressure was grinding him down. Within the industry, whispers began circulating. Is Tom thinking about leaving? Is he retiring? Is this his last season? Fans noticed something, too. Tom looked tired, thinner, less energetic. Online comments and speculation added more stress to an already difficult time. And then, the moment happened. One long night, after filming wrapped and the crew headed home, Tom stayed behind in the workshop alone. Surrounded by tools, unfinished wood, blueprints, and memories of decades on the show, he faced a truth he had been avoiding. His body needed to stop. His mind needed to rest. And his heart needed peace. For the first time in his entire career, Tom Silva chose himself. He made the decision to step back, not because he wanted to, but because continuing meant risking his health, his relationships, and everything he had left. The next morning, when he shared the news with producers, the room fell silent. No one saw it coming. Some tried to convince him to stay. Others were stunned. But the decision was final. Tom Silva, the backbone of this old house, was ready to walk away. When Tom Silva stepped away from this old house, the news rippled through the home renovation world like a shockwave. Fans couldn't believe it. Industry insiders were stunned. After decades of being the steady heartbeat of the series, Tom's absence left a silence everyone felt. But for Tom, it was the first time in years that he could finally breathe. He didn't throw a retirement party. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't chase new opportunities or try to stay relevant. He simply walked away, quietly, humbly, and with the same dignity that defined his entire career. For the first time in decades, Tom woke up without a call time. Without cameras waiting. Without producers asking for quick changes or sponsors needing promotions. He woke up in his own home, with his own schedule, in his own peaceful world. The first morning felt strange. Almost too quiet. Tom made his coffee, stepped outside, and listened to the wind, the birds, the stillness. It was the kind of moment he hadn't truly experienced since he was a young man. He realized something important. He hadn't lost his identity. He had simply found the part of himself that fame had buried for years. One of the biggest reasons Tom left the show was to reclaim time, something television had taken from him. And he used that time exactly where it mattered most, at home. He started spending long evenings with his wife, sharing meals without interruption, talking about life without being distracted by scripts or schedules. He reconnected with his children in ways he hadn't been able to for years. He became more present, more patient, more emotionally available. He even picked up small projects around the house, not for TV, not for deadlines, but simply because he enjoyed the craft. Each project reminded him of why he fell in love with building in the first place. It wasn't for fame. It wasn't for money. It was for the joy of creating something with his own hands. Tom didn't chase big new ventures after leaving the show. Instead, he chose the path most people wouldn't expect from a national TV icon. He went back to basics. He visited local lumberyards. He helped neighbors with small repairs. He volunteered his time mentoring young carpenters in community workshops. Without the cameras, Tom worked slower, gentler, and more deliberately. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His work became meditative, almost spiritual. Every cut, every measurement, every plan reminded him of his father's teachings. Craftsmanship, he realized, was never about recognition. It was about pride. Even though Tom stepped away from TV, the world didn't forget about him. Clips of his old episodes started going viral. Younger DIY creators referenced him as the gold standard of craftsmanship. Home improvement pages posted tributes calling him a legend. People began searching for updates. Where's Tom Silva now? Is he okay? What is he doing? Tom never cared for social media, but eventually, with the help of his family, he approved a small online presence, nothing flashy, nothing commercialized. Just occasional messages, simple woodworking tips, and glimpses of projects he was quietly working on. Fans were thrilled. Millions followed. Tom became an icon for a new generation, not through TV executives, but through genuine admiration. Today, Tom Silva lives exactly the way he always wanted. Calm mornings. Simple days. Honest work. Time with loved ones. And a heart finally free from the weight of fame. He didn't lose everything, as some rumors claimed. He actually found everything he had been missing. Peace. Joy. Purpose. Family. Freedom. But Tom's story wasn't finished yet. Because the world still had one question: where is he now, and what legacy does he leave behind? Even after stepping away from the cameras, Tom Silva's influence didn't fade. In fact, it quietly grew, shaping lives, homes, and the future of craftsmanship in ways most people never imagined. Because Tom's legacy wasn't just about visible projects or television fame. It was about impact you couldn't always see. Few knew that since 1999, Tom had been quietly funding disaster recovery efforts for families devastated by fire and storms across California and Massachusetts. 3 families, in particular, had their homes completely rebuilt with his assistance. He never sought recognition. No press releases. No social media posts. Just action. Witnesses would later describe seeing trucks arrive, materials unloaded, and crews working silently, sometimes late into the night. Homes that were ashes or ruins were restored to safety and warmth. Families were given a chance to rebuild their lives without debt or anxiety. All of it came through a foundation he never advertised, the Silva Brothers Foundation. Only 3 families initially knew the truth, sworn to secrecy. And for decades, the story remained hidden. Tom didn't just give money, he gave knowledge. Apprentices, young carpenters, and DIY enthusiasts across New England learned from him, either in person or through carefully documented projects. Every hand-measured joint, every dovetail carved, every floor level taught lessons that would ripple for generations. By 2025, more than 250 apprentices had trained under him, and statistics showed they made 15% fewer mistakes than those who had not learned his careful methods. DIY YouTube channels now echoed his techniques, garnering millions of views annually. Forums buzzed with debates about his old-school methods. And vintage tool collectors revered his restored saws, planes, and chisels, some worth thousands of dollars. Even a distant handsaw from the 1820s, bought for $50 at a barn auction, had become the crown jewel of his 200-tool collection, the centerpiece of one of the largest private collections in the country. But perhaps Tom's most lasting influence wasn't financial, technical, or even physical, it was philosophical. Every project, every lesson, every tool repair carried one message: craftsmanship, patience, and respect matter more than speed or shortcuts. He taught that mistakes are part of learning. That real skill comes from persistence, not gadgets. That old methods often work better than modern ones if used wisely. And that giving back quietly, without credit, carries a value no recognition can measure. By 2024, Tom Silva's lifetime achievements were honored formally. The National Housing Hall of Fame inducted him, citing a 38-year career that inspired over 50 million viewers to engage safely with home projects. Yet, despite accolades and awards, Tom remained modest. He never sought the spotlight. Instead, he focused on mentoring, on auditing jobs personally, and on teaching young carpenters that true legacy isn't in headlines, it's in every board laid, every joint perfected, every home saved. At 78, Tom continued walking through workshops, visiting job sites, and overseeing operations at Silva Brothers. He began writing a memoir, capturing decades of mistakes, lessons, ethics, and quiet triumphs. The book promised not just stories of construction, but a philosophy for life itself: discipline, humility, and heart. Even today, the man millions watched on TV continues to shape lives in ways most will never know. He is a craftsman, a mentor, a philanthropist, a guardian of old-world skill. He built more than homes. He built hope, resilience, and a blueprint for how a life of quiet work and careful choices can echo far beyond the eye of the camera. Tom Silva came into the world shaping stone and wood. And in a world obsessed with fame, speed, and spectacle, he left it with integrity, generosity, and a legacy invisible to most, yet. The humble carpenter from Massachusetts was never just a TV personality. He was a man who quietly changed the world, one house, one tool, and one life at a time. Even after decades in the spotlight and years of secret philanthropy, Tom Silva's story was far from over. Because some legacies aren't measured by awards, books, or TV ratings. They are measured by the ripple effect of a single person's dedication, craftsmanship, and quiet generosity. By 2025, the impact of his work had reached places Tom had never even stepped foot in. Young carpenters in small towns across New England were repairing homes using his techniques, often quoting him without ever meeting him. DIY enthusiasts online debated the nuances of the Silva shim method. Communities had rebuilt entire neighborhoods using his guidance, replicating techniques he demonstrated decades ago on this old house. And then there were the tools. Hundreds of vintage saws, planes, and chisels carefully restored in his Arlington workshop became living history. Each one carried the fingerprints of a master craftsman and the story of a life dedicated to precision. Tool collectors, historians, and apprentices alike revered the collection not for its monetary value, but for its testimony, the lessons and care embedded in each piece. But Tom's greatest influence wasn't on buildings or tools. It was on people. He had trained over 250 apprentices since 2010, mentoring them with patience that defied modern impatience. Data revealed an astonishing truth: apprentices under his guidance made 15% fewer mistakes than their peers. It wasn't magic, it was method, discipline, and attention to detail. And each of those apprentices carried a part of Tom into the future, spreading his philosophy to a world hungry for authenticity. Even his secret philanthropy continued quietly. Beyond the 3 families whose homes he had rebuilt after disasters, Tom expanded his reach. Materials, labor, and planning quietly flowed through local programs. Families affected by storms, fires, or economic hardship found themselves supported without ever knowing the man behind it. They only knew kindness, precision, and generosity arrived when they needed it most. Tom himself remained unchanged in his approach. Fame, accolades, and public recognition had little value compared to the satisfaction of helping others build, repair, and restore. Whether it was teaching his grandson dovetail joints, handcrafting furniture for local charities, or quietly consulting for a disaster-stricken home, Tom's hands were always busy, and his focus always steady. In June 2025, at the Provincetown Portuguese Festival, he carved wooden rosaries before a crowd of thousands. But while the festival celebrated tradition, it also celebrated Tom himself, not as a celebrity, but as a craftsman and community figure whose contributions went far beyond the public eye. Children watched him, wide-eyed. Adults paused to admire the precision and care in his work. And everywhere, people felt the quiet power of someone who dedicated life to doing good, without needing applause. His memoir, scheduled for release in 2026, promised to go even deeper. Stories of mistakes, ethical choices, personal triumphs, and quiet victories would let the world finally see the man behind the hands, not just the television persona. But even before it hit shelves, the influence of Tom Silva had already rippled across generations. Because the truth about Tom Silva isn't just about houses. It's about integrity. It's about generosity. It's about mastery. And it's about a life that quietly, persistently, reshaped the world around him. Tom Silva's legacy will endure, not in headlines or ratings, but in every home repaired, every apprentice trained, and every life quietly touched by his unseen hands.